we've talked about the first cemetery and when they moved it, and I think your brother was very active in organizing the first fire department here.
Well, now I wouldn't remember what about that, you know, I just wasn't involved. I know they used to have a bucket brigade. I think you remember Guy Martin burned down over here a couple of times, but even before that time, I think a Bolander had a garage there, and I believe they had a fire then. I believe that's the first fire I remember. But they didn't have any trucks or anything, you know, that, at that time.
And where Guy Martin was then was, and I think that fire was a fire that was started in a stove, wasn't it? And it's where the main...
this was years later.
But wasn't that the one, the 1946, and
Those are far, but we're talking about in the 20s.
in the 20s, so there was, okay.
I thought you wanted the early history.
Yeah, well, we do want the early history, but I had just remembered that the Main Street Art Gallery was at one time where Guy Martin was, and I think that when we talked with Ada Martin, she said they'd had a fire there and then they moved down on Broadway, so.
Yeah.
So they had another fire years earlier, so.
Oh, yeah. That was the first one I remember. But it's funny to see all of those people putting on their pants, running down the street, trying to get it one leg in so they could get on down to the fire.
How did they know that there was a fire? How did they call them for a fire? Did they have a whistle or what?
You know, I don't know. They don't know.
A bell?
I know how they called him on the telephone. Old man Harris from the Vera Hotel called him. We only had one telephone that was in the Vera Hotel, and he'd come out and announce that the revenuers were in this part of the country. They'd get their liquor covered up.
Or they would announce that he was in town, right? Somebody was looking for him.
But I guess they just word of mouth on the fire department. I don't know. They
Well, then
had some kind of a
later
whistle.
in later years, how did they call them out? Let's say like in the 50s, 40s and 50s.
When I worked at the telephone office, we was the one that had to push the switch if there was a fire, you know.
So you flipped the switch and a whistle went off?
Yeah, to blow the whistle.
Yeah.
And the whistle was on the water tank hill.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to punch it at 9 and 12 when we thought of it.
When you thought of it. And what did the whistle at 9 tell everybody, that the kids had to be off the street or what?
It was a curfew.
Yeah.
I remember that curfew.
They also had a signal. If it was just one whistle, they went to one part of town.
Yeah.
And if it was two whistles, they went to another part of town.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's
Your
all.
father was on the fire department, wasn't he?
Yeah, he would. Yeah, he was a chief for a long time after your brother.
Yeah.
Then they got the radios and got really fancy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember about the building of during, you talked about Bob being a CCC.
What?
Didn't Bob work for the CCC?
Yeah.
And so when they were this would have been in the 30s. Do you recollect the building was he involved with the building of the courthouse or Carrie Tingley Hospital?
Well, yes, I was working for the REA at that time, for the Relief Administration. And so I was the one that sent a lot of the boys to the CC camps. It was the best thing they ever had. That's what they ought to have in the South right now. Because I'll tell you I had this one experience. A boy went to high school with him, one of the fine boys. But he said he had to go, he never could get up too early on Saturday because his mother had to wash the only pair of Levi's that he had. But anyway, it came my time that I could pick one boy to go to the CC's. So I picked Charlie, and he went to the CC's. He learned big equipment. He went to work for the reclamation service. He worked there his whole life. And when he was about the time, I guess right after he retired, he was in town and he came and he told me, Annette, you did one of the finest things you ever did in your life was by sending me to the CCs. I learned a trade, and I had nothing to do with it, but I got credit for it.
That made you feel good, I bet.
Yeah, it made you feel good, yes. Yes, it did. He retired from the Bureau of Reclamation, after.
Do you remember other hospitals and other doctors that were here about that time? Because I think we've had, what, 3?
Good old Dr. White was here when we came. Dr. Freese was here, but I don't remember him. But he's there about where this drive-in is, right over here.
A&B Drive-In?
Yeah. There was a house, I think they tore down about a year ago. It was set there, that was his.
What about
Dr. White was here when we came. I think Dr. White had been up at one of the places close to Winston before he moved, before he came here.
What about Dr. Margaret Harris?
Who?
Dr. Margaret Harris.
Oh, yes. I'm not going to comment.
Oh, come on, Annette.
No. No. She built a hospital out there, I guess. I mean, they got later, or no, I guess in the beginning that's what that place was. So she did her part in life, I guess.
That was the first hospital that was here, which would be about where Anderson Homes is now. Yeah. And that burned down in about 83, something like in there.
I never did know what happened to it.
Yeah, it burned down about that time.
It was a VFW for a long time.
See what?
It was a VFW for a long time.
Hospital.
Yeah. That's where I was born, in that hospital.
Yeah.
Let's see. When you talked about teenagers, what did teenagers do here? I know you mentioned to me earlier that there was a miniature golf course.
Well, kids didn't have to be entertained at that time. They entertained themselves. I don't remember. I don't regret. I lost my mother when I was 10 years old. But I can't regret. I'm glad I was raised here. And I think the older people took advantage. I mean, they look after everybody else's kids too. They weren't bossy. We just knew that we better do what was right, or we'd be told on. And we played. I don't know. We used to get on old tires and roll in tires, and you'd make your stilts out of tin cans and tie baling wire on them and walk on those.
Did you play jacks? Did you ever play jacks and marbles?
Play jacks, yeah. You didn't have to be entertained. Most people went to work. I went to work when I was a junior. In high school, I went to work for the telephone office. I worked my junior and senior year there. Mm-hmm. Best thing ever happened to me. Got off at 9 o'clock. I worked from 4 to 9.
You came home and did your homework.
No, I went home and went to bed.
You didn't go home and do your homework?
I'm afraid I wasn't the best of student, but I sure had lots of fun.
What do you remember when you talked earlier about the war and how after World War II there was no housing here because the town seemed to have really been ballooning. What was it like when so many soldiers were gone? Do you remember that? No.
I was going too. I didn't stay. Bob went in the service. He was in school for about 3 months, I guess. And then he was assigned to a New Cumberland impregnation plant. That's where they impregnated clothing to keep off gas from. And so as soon as he got out of school, well, then I could go to him. And so we lived in Pennsylvania for 6 months, I guess. All went during one winter. And we learned to know what a hat was for and what gloves were for and so forth, because it was cold there. And wherever he was, I was with him most of the time. When he went to Fort Benning, that's too many people down there. I didn't go to Fort Benning. I came home and sold our business during that time. We had the cleaning plant before then, and so I came home that summer and we got rid of that.
Now, where was that cleaning plant or that cleaning shop?
Well, it was on 4th Street. I don't know what, where what's the Chamber of Commerce?
It was the torch office at one time. I think it's now no longer. There's no business in it now, but that was, it's
the Cleveland
the one
Cleaners.
on the corner as you
Cleveland.
go over the hill.
Cleveland Cleaners?
No.
I think it was later.
Yeah, Cleveland, they named it Cleveland after we sold it.
Right.
Okay.